While some people love to see heroes fight, I think it's more interesting when villains fight. Two of the most iconic villains in all of Japanese media, Frieza, the Emperor of the Universe, King Ghidorah, the King of Terror. What would happen if these two mighty monsters met on some godforsaken planet? Who would win a fight to the death? Today, we find out. But what versions, of course? Well, to make this the most thematic, I think it's fair if we use Showa King Ghidorah and Namek Saga Frieza. Since people keep downplaying the Showa era, I think it's only fair that we use this fight. Well, yes, and I do mean me, have generated arguments that could maybe put the Showa era up there with Dragon Ball Super. Those are harder for the general audience to swallow. So instead, we do something more, I guess, acceptable. So how powerful are each of our combatants? Since he's technically new to my channel, I'll cover Frieza first. Of course, everybody knows about super casual feats that Frieza would scale to, such as Piccolo easily vaporizing the moon. With so much energy it could destroy large planets in the DBZ anime, which is canon to the manga, along with Vegeta casually saying he could blow up the Earth in the Saiyan saga, as well as in the anime blowing up a planet and moon so easily that the energy can almost destroy small stars. But what about the Tyrant himself? Frieza has a super famous feat, that being casually blowing up planet Vegeta. Now, since it's been done many times, it's been calculated many ways. Since we are including the anime though, it's been calculated to at least large star level, all the way up to solar system level in the Cooler movie. Though that is a different dimension than the DBZ anime, it technically gives us a bit more of a picture on what actually happened, since the anime kind of just zooms out into vague space and blows it up. So we might be able to use the Cooler one as the full effect, basically. At this point in the story, power levels become actually linear, so now we can use Frieza's official power level to multiply his output even further. Frieza's first form is stated to have a max power of 530,000. His fourth form, at its full power, 120 million. Although one thing actually says 200 million, but that's probably wrong. This bumps Frieza's AP at least 200 times accordingly. So even at the low ends, we get Frieza being at least large star level into solar system level. But the explosion of planet Namek gives us some interesting things to think about. Recently, my friend Christian Kember calculated the explosion of planet Namek all the way up to solar system level, especially since Namek is surrounded by 3 suns, but when the planet explodes in the anime, these seem to be gone, just completely wiped out. So with that noted, Frieza might have unironically blown up 3 stars along with Namek. But what about King Ghidorah? How does he compare? It's been a long time since I've covered the Showa era in depth on my channel, so some of you may have forgotten. But King Ghidorah is the strongest monster in the Showa era, bar none, especially at the end of Destroy All Monsters, which is at the end of the timeline, where he's able to take on Godzilla, Anguirus, Gorosaurus, Mothra, and Kumanga, at least in the movie version, and straight up all 10 kaiju in the manga version. But even in his earlier days, Ghidorah has some very impressive statements and feats. So first, to go off the bare minimum, he is stated able to destroy entire planets, and I do mean destroy them. While he did life-wipe Venus, the fact that his gravity beams generate subatomic destruction, according to their properties, means that the feat would actually shoot all the way up to dwarf star level, bare minimum. But this was a casual feat. This was done when Ghidorah was simply playing around with his food. Ghidorah is stated to be outright invincible and unkillable in space. This means that none of the civilizations, or natural phenomena, or other monsters are able to actually kill him. This is interesting because the Ghidorah from the Zone Fighter series have bombs that they used in the past that were capable of blowing up gas giants with large star levels of energy. This means that King Ghidorah can literally just no-sell large stars exploding in his face. But how do we know that's consistent? Well, it's stated that the terror beasts used by the Ghidorah are actually their strongest weapons. This means that each terror beast would be more powerful than the nuclear bombs. Noteworthy, because Gigan is among those terror beasts. The same Gigan who scales to and below King Ghidorah. Now, while Ghidorah is in Gigan's film, this is the second weaker King Ghidorah. Yet he too scales to this impressive level of power. Furthermore, in Zone Fighter, he has a special crystal which he was going to use to actually absorb all the energy of the sun. And he's also stated to be Zone Fighter's strongest opponent at this point in time, which of course would include some of the terror beasts. But it also may include a special trap created by the Ghidorah, stated to be 10,000 times more powerful than Zone Fighter. Yes, indeed. This stupid car is thousands of times stronger than a supernova. And they also had a car compactor that would have crushed it and Zone Fighter to dust. But how could you possibly scale Ghidorah to such a thing? Well, it's stated his gravity beams are the strongest weapons in the universe. Meaning he's bare minimum solar system level at this point in time, and then he proceeds to get even more powerful, or just hold back less. In character, he might have been playing with his food on Earth. It's stated he's stronger on Planet X, and that he already life-wiped it in mere days after he lost on Earth. So yeah, he was just really pissy and life-wiped the whole planet, just because he felt like it. We can get even further beyond. Like with Dragon Ball's very infamous multipliers, the Showa era too has multipliers for its strength increases. Godzilla stated to get stronger every day. He seems to start training very regularly, at least by the time of Zone Fighter, and we see his power progression has increased a lot, and was already pretty notable beforehand. While Gigan initially very much pressed Godzilla in their first fight, in their second battle, where Gigan also had the assistance of Megalon, who's stated to be even stronger, Godzilla easily dealt with them both, and he actually considered Gigan to be weak. In Zone Fighter, he could literally beat Gigan to death with his tail. The Mechagodzilla films give us some more interesting scaling. We know that King Caesar was able to fight on par with Mechagodzilla, and used his prism eyes to redirect his beam back at him 10 times over. The mech no-sells this, which is interesting because its own beam clash with Godzilla resulted in heavy damage that needed to be repaired. After Godzilla's power-up from the lightning, he's casually able to pierce Mechagodzilla's armor and twist its head off, even when he's already been weakened by a barrage of its weapons. Then, the rebuilt Mechagodzilla is stated to have weapons 5 times more powerful and more durable armor to take the atomic breath. But now, the atomic breath actually does more damage, and now Mechagodzilla is the one who needs help from Titanosaurus, who's stated to be on Godzilla's level. So with this power progression in such a short span of time, begs the question, how much more powerful would Godzilla get in the at least 20 years until Destroy All Monsters? But still, this means that at the very bare minimum, Godzilla would have gotten at least 50 times more powerful, and he would be even stronger by the time of Destroy All Monsters. And not only was Ghidorah more powerful than him in Destroy All Monsters, he actually made Godzilla afraid of him. Inverse point of view statements from Godzilla literally have him say that King Ghidorah is the most terrifying enemy he's ever faced, one that he wouldn't dare fight alone. But what about speed? Power isn't everything. If you can't hit your opponent, they can whittle you down. Well, we have lightspeed scaling as early as original Dragon Ball, with King Piccolo being stated to use lasers, Kid Goku dodging lasers, Kid Goku outrunning the solar flare, which is literally just an attack of light, and other such easy feats, all the way back when characters had power levels in the hundreds. Interestingly, the anime gives us a pretty noteworthy feat, where Goku is able to react to meteors that were flying past his spaceship that could get to Jupiter in mere minutes, meaning that these meteors would have to be moving hundreds of times the speed of light, and Goku, with a power level of 9,000-ish, since he just got a Zenkai from the Vegeta fight, is hundreds of times the speed of light. Simply upscaling this for Frieza would get him to the millions of times the speed of light range, at least. Higher ends do exist though. Namek is stated to be in another galaxy multiple times. In fact, it's even outside of the North Quadrant, which contains a quarter of the galaxies in the universe. Goku's ship reached Namek in about a week, reaching speeds at least billions of times the speed of light. This is noteworthy because in the anime, King Kai was able to casually keep up with Goku in his ship, but he was not able to see Goku and Frieza fighting. So these people can blitz a ship that can move billions of times the speed of light. Could King Ghidorah possibly catch Frieza? Actually, I'd say yes. Second Gen Ghidorah and Gigan were able to fly from the M Nebula, which is 30,000 light years from Earth, to Earth in about 57 seconds on screen. It may have taken them a few minutes in canon, but they actually got to the planet pretty quickly. With that noted, that means that feat would already be in the billions of times light speed range. And second gen Ghidorah is stated to be slower than the original, which makes some sense considering Zone Fighter was able to outspeed it blatantly, the same Zone Fighter who Godzilla can match in hand-to-hand combat. And Gigan was tagged by Showa Godzilla when he was flying away. He would most likely be using his space speed at this point, since he is very desperate and trying to escape. With that in mind, Godzilla is able to blitz people billions of times the speed of light, and yet, when he fights Ghidorah, Ghidorah is able to tag him numerous times and presses him pretty blatantly. Godzilla is also a very skilled fighter, which is part of the reason he is able to evade so many of Ghidorah's attacks. So these two should probably be comparable in speed. As for durability, King Ghidorah can casually no-sell his own gravity beams as shown by second gen, which is very interesting because not only are these beams very powerful, but they also have very interesting abilities. The fact that he can no-sell his own attacks puts his durability significantly above his attack potency. As for Frieza, not only did he take a beating from Super Saiyan Goku, who's more powerful than him, but even when super low on energy, cut in half, and probably unconscious, his body still survived the solar system level output of Namek's explosion and he didn't die. So yeah, that's kind of crazy. What about special abilities? In terms of abilities, all key users have some pretty interesting stuff. Not only do they just shoot laser beams like so many people commonly cite as downplay, but they can also affect your soul, your mind, your body, and once it's powerful enough, it could even affect space itself. Though Frieza is nowhere near the power of the characters who can do that, the fact Ki doesn't just seem to just get magically new powers would just mean that Frieza would do so to a lesser extent. He also possesses things like telekinesis, he can fly, survive the vacuum of space, is a skilled melee fighter, and has a number of Ki-based attacks that he could use to his advantage. King Ghidorah is a hacked monster in the Showa era. Like, it's actually absurd how stupidly powerful he is. His anatomy holds so many secret abilities, it would take a very long time to cover everything, and I have an old video discussing some of them. The gravity beams, they have radiation, they can destroy your gravity, they can destroy all matter, they of course bypass your physical durability because of that, they generate intense heat, he has things like poison, madness manipulation, he can attack your DNA, he can survive the vacuum of space just fine, he can turn himself intangible in his fire form. He can convert energy into usable power for himself, so he can absorb energy mid-combat. He can sense your presence. He can detect life on even distant planets. He can generate rust on you, which can bind your movements. Magnetism, gravity manipulation, even without the gravity beams, since he can move around things just by standing there. He can create hurricane-like winds, and he even has regeneration, although not as flashy as his Monsterverse counterpart. Zone Fighter snaps the necks of the second-gen Ghidorah, and he's fine afterwards. He actually just flies away. This means he could heal broken bones in a vital area and just move. Ki allows its users to generate powerful shockwaves, attack the spirit, the mind, and the body, generate intense heat, attack the soul, at least in the anime. It's stated able to disintegrate matter and reduce things to atoms, which is ironically stated for what Trunks did to Frieza when he came to Earth. Frieza was able to resist the spirit bomb somewhat, which attacks evil in itself, purifies things, generates radiation as it absorbs energy from even stars, and may in fact be quantum in scale. So who would win this battle? If we stick with their consistent stuff, I'd say that King Ghidorah still wins, but it would be a pretty interesting fight. Ghidorah's just too hacksy and just broken. Not only would he be stronger than Frieza if we stack all the numbers, he'd also be more durable, he'd be comparable in speed, maybe slower, but maybe not, and just has so many abilities. There's going to be only one Tyrant of the Universe after this fight. If you bring him back in his Mecha Frieza form, it's stated he's 10 times stronger, but since King Ghidorah just seems to get stronger on his own, and it's mentioned he can absorb the genetics of his enemies, he may have simply adapted to Frieza by this point in time, and that's assuming that a Frieza body would survive Ghidorah's attacks. Since Ghidorah has the advantage of being able to sense Frieza, that also gives him an advantage if Frieza does survive, say, the planet exploding after being mauled by Ghidorah. He's going to sense that he's still alive and actually finish him off. But of course, there are higher metas I haven't touched up on yet. Some not only cite that Frieza destroyed 3 stars on Namek, but if you look in the back, you could see just a void, whereas previously there were stars there. This is actually a better version of that super stupid wanked feat from One Punch Man, because this one, it actually happened. But if you actually think that Frieza created a invisible void of stars, then of course he would be multi-solar system level. How could Ghidorah possibly keep up with that? Well, with those insane multipliers I brought up earlier, if we were to apply everything, Ghidorah would not only be multi-solar system level, he would actually be almost galaxy level, and on top of that, that's not including Zone Fighter's super radiation, that's even better than nuclear fusion, which amps a terror beast, which Zone Fighter then just trains and scales to later. And since King Ghidorah is the most powerful monster in the whole universe, he'd definitely scale to that. With that noted, the 4th dimensional stuff from Zone Fighter, if you actually think that 4D stuff automatically means you are universal, since you would be qualitatively above any 3-dimensional object, would mean that people much weaker than King Ghidorah can tear apart 4th dimensional objects and beings. In fact, the kaiju can actually raise the area around him to 4th dimensional. That's pretty impressive, and would mean that even in the higher end stuff, King Ghidorah wins.